How many people, am I coming through? I guess I am. How many people out here have heard the expression record high cattle prices? Would you rather had an inflation adjustment? How many of you out here would rather have an inflation adjustment on your cattle and your sheep? Okay. There's another term that is used for an inflation adjustment, and that is called parity. Parity is a price that you get compared to what it costs you to operate your farms and ranches. And so what I'd like to do is show you a little bit about a failure now that we're having in our farm programs. And I'd like to make an exception to what I'm saying ahead of time. I feel that Andy Green and Zach Ducheneau is a real friend of this organization. And I don't want to criticize their efforts in trying to do good for the farmers and the ranchers. But their hands are tied by the Congress and the Senate because they have to administer the programs according to what the policy of the House and Senate Ag Commission are. It's up to us to give them the tools to make improvements in programs and so on. What I'd like to do is point out a failure, though, that we have had in our approach to the farm problem. And so I hope I can get this right. There we go. As you can see, the green on the bottom there, that's the on-farm income that we have had from 1960. Now what's interesting here, in 1960, the on-farm income and the off-farm income is just about equal. Well, what happened since then, because of low farm prices, that the off-farm income has skyrocketed. Now, what is that off-farm income? That's the woman of the house, maybe she's delivering mail, or maybe teaching school, or the farmer himself is out doing custom work for the neighbors, doing harvesting or planting or whatever. And so that shows what has been happening over a period of years. And look at how that's skyrocketed. And yet what has happened with the on-farm income? This is what you're actually paid for your crops and your livestock. It's pretty well stayed down here, up and down. And we have not had an adjustment in the inflation on all our crops. Whoops. There we go. This is a graph now of 13 of the major crops that we raise in the United States. It starts off with cotton, and you got cotton and going right on down the line, wheat, corn, and so on. Goes right on down the line, ending with hogs, cattle, and lambs. And the prices are received in this column, and an inflation adjustment or parity is listed in this column here. Now, what is interesting here is that you can see the prices in there that we should be receiving to have an price adjustment for inflation. So what I did is I totaled up the prices that we received down at the bottom here, and it looks like what we get here is 34.8% is what we're trying to operate our farms and ranches on. And this is where we need to work on this and get some real justice there. Now, in the wheats and feed grains, for 24 years, we took the production of those grains for 24 years, and that's your production there. And when you take the production or the consumption against our production, and that percentage is listed down here at the bottom. We're using 104% of our total production. And the farm programs that we've been having are not addressing our threat to our food security anymore. And in order to have food security, that we have got to have prices that are in adjustment with what the costs are. These are the principal crops that are raised. Now the figures that they used in this are taken from the FSA offices, which is pretty reliable. This line here, the blue line, is the crops that are planted in each year for the past 18 or 19 years. But the thing that's significant is, which way is the trend line in there going? Which way is it going? It's going down. Okay, the red line over here is the harvested acreage of our crops. And look at which way are they going? They're also going down. This is a threat to our food security. This is our cattle herd in this country. These are the mother cows. This is where the beef cycle starts. And as you can see here, this is just continually going down. It is in the downward spiral also. Here again, that's a threat to our food security. The cost of farm programs now in 5 years is amounted to $142 billion. Now, when you look at that figure there, there's a lot of things that are thrown into that. Everything but the kitchen sink go into that. And it isn't all the price supports or anything for the farmers and ranchers. There's a lot of other things included in that. And those are good programs. I mean, my God, I think you got the cost of the Forestry Service and lunch programs and so on. And those are all good programs. But they need to stand on their own and not blame the farmer for the high cost of the farm programs. The loss of farmland, that's including pasture land, since 1981 amounts to 165 million acres in the United States. And this loss of farmland is a threat to our food security. A lot of that farmland that is being lost is, some of it is very good prime farmland. And once it's covered over with asphalt and concrete and apartment buildings and parking lots, you can't farm it anymore. The land mass of Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Maryland represent that loss. That's the total land mass. The loss of farmers and ranchers amounts to 543 since 1981. And here again, that's a loss of our food security. We must look at our farm programs in this country and see what we need to do to correct these losses if we're going to maintain our food security. That loss of farmers is equivalent to the number of farm operations in North Dakota, South Dakota, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa, Illinois, Nebraska, and Colorado. And that is the loss of those farming operations. Here is a drought monitor taken 2 years ago, and of course out in California in the western part of the United States, it was a tremendous loss we had. We had the driest year there in 127 years, and there are some people who made studies using tree rings from petrified wood, and they said that this loss actually goes back as far as 1,200 years, the driest in 1,200 years. Now, when you look at the United States map and you take off the western half, that was severely impacted by the drought that we had. And over on the eastern side of the United States, they had the opposite thing. They had so much rain they couldn't get the crops planted, and what they did get planted got too much rain, and it was hampering the growth. But the net result is that we have been losing our ability to feed our people in this country. Now, to make this a little more dramatic, there were 2 cities in the world that had a population of 10 million or more in 1950. Those 2 cities were New York City and Paris, France. Today, they estimate now that there are 18 cities in the world with a population each of 10 million or more. By the year 2050, they estimate now that there are going to be over 400 cities in the world, that each one with a population of 10 million or more are going to be here to contend with. Now, some people argue with this that, well, no, the birth rate is falling, and therefore we're going to, that isn't going to come true. But what they're not saying is us old golfers, we're living a lot longer, and we're retiring at higher ages and so on. And so that is going to affect the population of the world also. And so what does that have to do with us here in this country? We are facing, I think, a real calamity here in our food production if we don't do something about our food security and getting farm programs that are something that we can hang on to. Let's see. Okay, there we go. We once had, I think, one of the best farm programs we ever had in the history of this country, and that was called the Stegall Amendment. And what that was is that in 1941, when the onset of the Second World War happened and the bombing of Pearl Harbor, there was such a fever to go to war at that time that they instituted, was actually one man with a group of his advisors by the name of Carl Wilkin, and he instituted and helped put in the Stegall Amendment. And what that said basically is that all farm commodities, and they had a listing of 200 farm commodities, and it also included the fishing industry, that it would be supported at 90% of parity, a floor at 90% of parity. And so, as you can see this, there's 90% of parity, and all of a sudden here that we got this a floor put under there, and so it maintained those prices that we got cleared until 1952, until it was repealed. Now that laid a foundation for agriculture, the benefits of which are still being felt by some farmers today, are still benefiting from that. I have some neighbors that back in those days, they bought land and so on the income that they earned off their crops and livestock. And that land is very valuable today. And so they greatly benefited from that. So I think my time is running out. I got a bunch of zeros up here. But anyway, I want to say in conclusion that if you want to have freedom and liberty, you first must have economic freedom. And we got to look at a new kind of farm program that will give farmers and ranchers this country the economic freedom that they deserve. And that will also give everybody in this country the food security that they really deserve. So with that, I have to conclude, and I'll visit with anybody that cares to come around and answer questions or statements or anything else. and I want to thank you.